What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. Today it's the penultimate game week preview, of course, for game week 37 plus. Only one more to go after this. In this one, as always, going to go through the topics and the questions that you guys put to me on Twitter and YouTube, as well as talk about who I think are the best captaincy picks for this week as well. There's lots to go through, as you might imagine, at this stage of the season, so let's jump straight into it. Okay, so I'll try and make this as short and as snappy as possible. Rotation fears up first. So if you don't already know, and I'm sure most of you do, for the FA Cup, we're gonna have to do our deadline picks before game week 37 deadline, of course. Then their teams are going to play in the FA Cup, and then they're going to have to play their Premier League game. So we won't know if anyone's got injured in the FA Cup. We won't know who's had their minutes managed, who's had to play 120 minutes potentially. So there are some rotation fears that people have, and a few people asked me to talk about this. So I'm going to go through each team one by one. We know it's Chelsea, Man United, Man City and Arsenal that are going to play in the FA Cup. So like I said, they've all got games before their Premier League game. Now, for me, I'm not really worried about rotation at all, to be honest, and I'm going to talk about why, team by team. So Chelsea, the main players there for me, Azpilicueta, Pulisic and Willian, they're the players that most weeks will start every single week. And I don't think that's going to be different whether they play in the FA Cup or not. They're going to be needed for that Liverpool game because there's so much riding on it. There's still a top 4 spot up for grabs. And by that time, if Leicester and Man United have won their games, then Chelsea are going to be behind in 5th place playing Liverpool. They're going to need every single player they can get. So for other players, like maybe people bought in 1 week punts for Giroud and Alonso. Now, I think they are a risk, but that's not necessarily an FA Cup thing. That's just because you don't know week to week if they're going to start anyway. So they could be rotated, but it's not necessarily an FA Cup problem. So Alonso played well against Norwich, but it was Norwich, didn't have much defending to do. Could Reece James come back in? He absolutely could. We just don't know. And with Giroud, I feel like they're a better team with Giroud. Doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to start. So for me, the main players in Chelsea are fine. The other players were kind of punts, and against Liverpool and Wolves, they're probably not the best options anyway, I don't think, personally. Man United, pretty similar story. Top 4's up for grabs. There is no way, I don't think, even if they play 120 minutes, that Rashford, Martial, Bruno Fernandes, Pogba, and probably even Greenwood won't start in the league. Now, I do think some of those players need a rest. I wouldn't be surprised to see Pogba get a rest in the next 2 games, Greenwood as well. Bruno Fernandes could really, I don't think he's going to get a rest, but we could really do with bringing him off after like 50 or 60 minutes, just to give him some time off, basically. So I do think there'll be some rotation, but I think from an FPL point of view, that rotation might happen in the FA Cup. So hopefully, from an FPL point of view, it might be more difficult to win that Chelsea game, but I think they're going to get rotated. So again, I wouldn't be too concerned about them. With Arsenal, first question is, who does anyone own from Arsenal anyway? The likes of Saka could see a bit of rotation, and Nketiah can't play till the Aston Villa game anyway, so he might play that because Lacazette will have played so many minutes recently. And then there's Aubameyang, but he's just had a rest, so I fully expect him to play in the FA Cup and probably the last 2 games. If they somehow beat Man City, then maybe he gets a rest on the last day of the season. But it would seem unlikely because it's a 6-day rest until the FA Cup final anyway. So I don't think there's huge concerns with Arsenal, mostly because a lot of people don't own their players. And then Man City, is there going to be a rotation? Yes. What's new about that? Absolutely nothing. If I had to guess, I'd say a lot of the players that played against Bournemouth will probably play against Watford, but there's no guarantee with that. My broad general view with Man City, and I've got them on the list as well to talk about really, because people are asking me what to do with Man City players. I think you can bring them in this week, but you have to bring them in knowing there's a chance they don't play. Like, will Foden and David Silva play in the FA Cup? Maybe not, in which case they're probably good for Watford. But De Bruyne just had a full rest, after playing only 60 minutes. So if he plays in the FA Cup, will he then get another kind of cameo in the Watford game? I don't know. But I've got De Bruyne and Mahrez and Jesus, and I'm basically going to stick with them, hope for the best. And then in game week 38, once I've seen the Bournemouth lineup, the FA Cup lineup, the Watford lineup, then I'm going to maybe look at who's played and who might get rested in game week 38 and potentially move the players around then. But until then, I'm not going to hugely worry about it. I know some people are still thinking about bringing Jesus in. I still like him as an option, and there is a chance he'll get 60 minutes and 60 minutes against Watford and Norwich. There's also a chance he'll get 30 in one and 60 in the other. So only 90 minutes over kind of a 2-game week period is not great. But he's been in such good form that I still think that's a good chance to get some good points. So I still like Jesus if you want to bring him in. David Silva and Foden if you want to take the punt that they don't play in the FA Cup. Everyone else is going to really depend on how many minutes they play in that FA Cup match. And it's hard to tell. So I would probably just stick with what you have when it comes to Man City for me. So a few people asked me about Ings versus Jimenez, bringing one of them in this week. And a few people asked about Jimenez to Ings as a transfer. Now, I think one of the things that's going to ring through this video over and over again is if you can save a transfer this week, I do think that's going to be hugely beneficial going into the last game week for plenty of reasons. One, we might get some early team news. Two, you're going to kind of know what position you're in rank-wise and mini-league-wise and what you need to do in that final week. So for me, I'm hoping in 37 I can get another green arrow and maybe make it up the ranks a bit closer to top 100k, and then I can realize or think about how different I need to go in the final game week to get into that top 100k place. But maybe if you're in the top 5k, for example, you just want to stay, you want to make a safe transfer, then you can do that as well. But obviously, you'll find out injuries from the FA Cup from game week 37. You'll have 2 transfers, which obviously makes you more flexible than having one. So would I do Jimenez to Ings? I'm not 100% sure I would right now. So Ings has Bournemouth away, who've been playing a bit better. Sheffield United at home, who are decent usually, although they weren't great against Leicester, it has to be said. And then Jimenez has Palace at home, who haven't kept many. I think they've only kept 1 clean sheet since the restart. They did do quite well against Man United, but still ended up losing 2-0. Bit unlucky not to have a penalty, to be fair. And then Chelsea away, which I think is a good fixture, to be honest, for them. I think Wolves will step it up against Chelsea. I think Jimenez could get points there. So I think Ings and Jimenez both have similar fixtures. You'd probably say on paper Ings are better. But if I could save a transfer, I probably wouldn't do Jimenez to Ings unless you absolutely think that Ings is going to smash it compared to what Jimenez will do for the last 2. Now, if you look at the stats, chances created since the restart, this is Ings 12, Jimenez 6. Shots, Ings 20, Jimenez 15. Shots inside the box, you know where this is going. Ings 19, Jimenez 13. So Ings is getting more shots away, although not as many on target. 6 on target for Ings, 8 for Jimenez. But even expected goals, as you might imagine, are better for Ings. So 3.19 versus 1.52 for Jimenez. So all those stats are from Fantasy Football Scout if you want to check them out. So overall, if I had to pick one this week, I think I still would just about go for Danny Ings. If I was looking at doing Jimenez to Ings and it was my only transfer I had available, I'd maybe rethink that. If I had 2 free transfers, possibly go and do it. But I don't think Jimenez is that bad an option where you need to make that Jimenez to Ings transfer like it's, you know, like your FPL rank depends on it basically. So that's what I would say for those 2. And then what to do with Chelsea players. So, I mean, a lot of people got them in expecting bigger scores against Norwich, and now they see that they're facing Liverpool. A few people are pointing out that Liverpool defence isn't as good, and it's not. They've dropped more points since the restart, I think, than they had before for the rest of the season, which is ridiculous. And obviously we're seeing Alisson and Van Dijk making mistakes, which isn't like them. But how many more mistakes are they going to make? I don't think they're suddenly on the beach. I think Klopp is still going to want to play a pretty full kind of first 11 team for the next 2 fixtures. So I don't think that is an easy game for Chelsea. But again, if I only had 1 free transfer and I had Pulisic, I'd maybe think about either benching him or keeping him and actually playing him. I don't think it's the worst fixture for Chelsea. And they might actually be able to do slightly better against a better team because they reminded me against Norwich of Man United. They did find them at times hard to break down, but they've got the players in Willian and Pulisic with that pace to kind of play on the counter versus a team like Liverpool. Not saying that they would catch Liverpool out, but I think that's more how they would set up. So I don't think it's the worst thing to hold them. But if you've got 2 free transfers, maybe you could look to get rid of one of them for whoever it might be, whether it's Giroud to Chris Wood or Pulisic to David Silva or Trossard or someone like that. You could do it. But if I had 1 free transfer, to be honest, I would probably just play him this week. It's not the worst fixture, and it's probably not the worst time to play Liverpool either. But I wouldn't be expecting huge returns personally. Okay, so some people are looking to make defender transfers. So who are the best defenders for the next 2 weeks? So I've just picked out the teams to target really. So Burnley, Norwich away and Brighton at home. I think 2 good fixtures. Burnley, no matter what injuries they got, what lineup they put, how many games they have to play, they always pull clean sheets out of the bag. So you've got Bardsley, Tarkowski and Peters, all good options. Peters has actually been playing in a more advanced position. I think Tarkowski maybe for a bit of goal threat as well. Though he is 5.4 million, so he's not a completely cheap option. Bardsley and Peters are a bit cheaper, but I like Norwich away and Brighton at home. Arsenal, now not many people probably expected me to say that, but Villa away, very goal shy. Watford at home. I think they're 2 pretty good fixtures to end the season for Arsenal. And defensively, they have looked better. Only conceded 1 to Liverpool. Granted, they maybe should have conceded a few more, but still a decent result. Kieran Tierney is someone I like, and I might look at him again next season. I did look at his stats. 1 chance created, 1 shot since restart. So not fantastic, to be honest. But there's something about him. If I was going to punt, I might go for him. Otherwise, Mustafi's had 4 shots and Bellerin 3 shots, 2 chances created. They might be slightly better options, but I genuinely, I can't believe I'm saying this, I quite like those Arsenal fixtures, and I think they might do okay in those last two. Brighton, very good as well. Newcastle at home, Burnley away. I think there's a few options there. Like Lamptey is quite cheap. Webster as well, but I think I would go for Dunk. I think he's probably the best for bonus and 4 shots. And then Everton, I was talking about Lucas Digne recently, but Sheffield United away, Bournemouth at home suddenly doesn't look great when you're not playing great yourself. Everton, that is, rather than Lucas himself. So I'm not sure I would trust them. So they're personally probably the 3 teams that I would look at: Brighton, Arsenal and Burnley. Southampton fixtures are quite good as well, but not good enough to bring in a defender, I think. So my top ones would be Dunk, probably Bellerin from Arsenal, although there's something about Tierney where I would want to bring him in, and then one of Tarkowski, Peters, Barzi, depending on how much money you've got, really. If you've got the money to go up to Tarkowski, I probably would, but the other 2 options are really good as well. Triple captain options, like people still holding their triple captainship for the last 2 game weeks. Don't overthink this. Who do you think is the best captain for the next 2 weeks? Go for one of them. Simple as that. I think Salah in the next 2 weeks could be a little bit of a different option. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I prefer Newcastle, but I know some people are looking to free hit in the final game week, so they're going to go this week instead. In which case, you've got Danny Ings against Bournemouth, could be an option. I mean, even if he doesn't get a huge double-digit haul, he's pretty consistent. I really like Martial and Fernandes at home to West Ham as well. So that's where I'd be looking at it this week. Maybe Salah next week against Newcastle are good options. And Mane is a huge differential if you wanted to go there. And of course, if you're not free hitting in Game Week 38, then you've got Man City versus Norwich at home. So you could wait and see if we get any team news and then go from there and basically bring in and triple captain whichever Man City player is going to start, whether it's Jesus, Mahrez or Sterling, whoever you think is going to get the biggest score. So there's plenty of options still. Free hit, some people still asking when to use it. I mean, I personally still prefer Game Week 38, but depending on your team, 37 might be better. Maybe you've got Antonio, you don't want to play him against Man United away. Maybe you've got Chelsea players, you don't want to play them against Liverpool, so you could free hit them out. You could go without as many Man City players if you think there's going to be a rotation. So I don't think Game Week 37 is awful, but I do prefer Game Week 38. Let me just say that. In terms of who to get, I'm not going to go through every single player for a free hit team. Most of the players I would go for, we've already talked about anyway. I think they're obvious. Man City, Man United. Maybe, I don't know, maybe an Antonio on the last day of the season if you go Game Week 38 against Aston Villa at home could be decent as well. And then I wanted to finish off with differential options. So I've talked about this a bit over the last few videos and on the Scoutcast. Now, for me, I don't think a differential has to be super low owned, like less than 5%, less than 2% or whatever it might be. Sometimes big hitters find themselves with less ownership for various reasons. Maybe it's fixtures, maybe they haven't been performing that well, maybe they've not scored enough points. So the key players I've picked out are all big hitters. So this is top 10k ownership, and I should just do the kind of last time I'm probably going to do this because I've said it quite a few times this week. Obviously, top 10k ownership doesn't just depend on transfers in and out in the top 10k. Obviously, if a player goes nuts and scores a hat-trick or 4 goals, then that's suddenly going to propel a lot of teams into the top 10k, and suddenly their ownership in the top 10k has gone up, literally because a player owned them and went up the ranks rather than transferred them in. But still, I like it as a good indication of who people who are active own. So Salah, 43.12%. That's still quite high. Nowhere near a differential level of 5 or 10%. But 1 in every 2 managers not owning Salah. That doesn't happen very often. Newcastle, one of the worst defences in the league since restart. Last day of the season, I like Salah. Maybe even against Chelsea could be an option. And Mane, 5.98% ownership in the top 10k is so low. He's a huge differential. If you think he could go better than Man City players, could go better than Salah, I really like the look of him for the last 2 game weeks. Then we've got the Man City players. They're still fairly low owned. Now, their ownership will probably go up this week because they got Watford away and Norwich at home. But still, it's maybe not going to go to the levels of like 70-80%. Obviously, De Bruyne is already around there, but the rest of them aren't. So Mahrez is still less than 12% owned. Sterling's nearly 40%. Jesus is 40%. Now, that sounds high again. But 40% owned Sterling and 40% owned Jesus against Norwich at home, for example, you'd imagine that a lot of captains would go on Sterling and then a few more would go on Jesus as well. But they're not going to be near this kind of 100% effective ownership or anything like that. So I still think they're good. Martial, 55%, quite high, but nowhere near. Fernandes is 91%. So every time Martial scores, I'm getting a green arrow. I'm absolutely loving that. Rashford, 25%. He looks on form as well. So these are kind of the players that I would look at who are actually still differentials, would you believe it or not. If you want to go mega differential, then Kane 4.3%, Aubameyang's 4.3% as well, Wood 0.04%, who's playing Norwich away this week, and Antonio, Villa last day of the season, 14.81%. So when it comes to differentials, I think the first thing people think is I have to go for someone no one's ever thought about, playing on a team that aren't actually that good because they're a little bit differential. But really, I think it's these big hitters that make a huge difference. And while they're not kind of on a 100%, 90%, 80% ownership, for me, that is still differential enough, especially when you factor in captaincy, especially last day of the season. People will still go Fernandes against Leicester. People will go around the Man City assets. Could be Sterling, could be De Bruyne, could be Mahrez, could be Jesus. You've got Mane and Salah playing Newcastle. There's going to be a huge variance, I think, in captaincies and a big chance to make up ground. So I would definitely look at those players if you don't own them. Big differentials, even though you might not think they are when you first think about it. Okay, let's kick off captaincy. And there's a lot of options this week, as there has been for the last few weeks. A lot of different options. I don't think we're going to see too many players over 100% effective ownership in the top 10k. Let's talk about the players that I've not got listed, or the teams I've not got listed. So Spurs versus Leicester. Leicester's defence is pretty makeshift right now. Chilwell's been out. James Justin is playing instead of Pereira. Soyuncu is suspended, so Wes Morgan came in. Now, they did keep a clean sheet against Sheffield United. Probably a little bit of a different prospect against Spurs, especially if they play with kind of Son and Kane up front. So Son and Kane are outside shots. I think Spurs defensively have been quite good, but I wouldn't expect Jamie Vardy to be completely quiet in that game either. So Vardy's an outside shot as well. If you really want to go punty, a lot of people looking to bring in Chris Wood, Jay Rodriguez if he's fit, maybe even McNeil for Burnley. Outside punts against the Norwich team who have been quite poor. I really like Chris Wood actually. May even bring him in this week myself. So that's an option too. And even Brighton versus Newcastle. Statistically, Newcastle have been the worst defence since the restart. So Morpay and Trossard could also be options too. But let's talk about probably the main contenders most people are going to go for. So Liverpool versus Chelsea. I still like Salah and Mane. Chelsea's defence doesn't strike me when I watch them as one that's going to keep many clean sheets. So I would expect Liverpool to score. When you look at it from a stats perspective, Chelsea's defence is okay. It's kind of middling. It's not awful. It's not fantastic either. It's not like as bad as Newcastle. It's not as good as maybe a Man United have been. But it's okay. So I wouldn't expect a huge amount of goals necessarily. But Liverpool have a huge rest period compared to Chelsea. They're going to get a full 7 days off. It's just like a normal week for them. But Chelsea have to play in that FA Cup game. So that could have some bearing on the game. So I still like Salah. I still like Mane as a big differential. In terms of expecting goal involvement for most of the players we're going to talk about now, Salah is top since restart. 5.39 expected goal involvement. So that's expected goals and expected assists added together. Mane is 3.59. Although I will say, generally, and this happened a lot last year, Salah gets more chances, but Mane tends to get almost as many big chances. So Salah's had 8 big chances since the restart. Mane has had 6, so he's usually quite up there. So I like both of those options, and they're both going to be hungry for goals. Mane's not going to like Salah being way ahead of him, and Salah is still going to think he can get the golden boot. So I think they're big opportunities this week, big differentials. Most people are not going to captain them, I don't think. Man United versus West Ham, like I said earlier, I don't think that this is going to be, or we're going to see much rotation here. I think the main boys are still going to play. I think Martial, I don't think he got any bonus points last night. So if I did my maths right, him and Fernandes have now scored the same amount of points since restart. So obviously Bruno Fernandes was the one to get. But Martial has been incredible. In the last few games, he has looked so good, so hungry for goals. He's kind of driving at defenders, causing them so many problems, and just smashing it in inside the box as well. So another great finish last night. I'm actually probably going to captain him ahead of Fernandes. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I expect Fernandes to be the most captain Man United player. So I think him and Martial have both got a good chance of scoring points. So I'm going to go for the one that's less so. Now, I will say, since I'm not saying I started this or anything, but since I first started thinking about this, I've seen plenty of other people also thinking about this. So the difference in captaincy might not actually be that much. By the time the game week comes around or the deadline comes around, Martial could be, like if he's 55% owned, that's going to go up and his captaincy is going to be higher as well. So they might be closer together. But I just think in the last few games has been incredible. And at home, the last 3 home scores are ridiculous, by the way. 14, 21, and I can't remember what the other one was, but it's pretty high as well. And even the game before that, if you go back 4 games before restart, he scored 8 against Man City. So his home form's been incredible. So I really like Martial, but do not discount Rashford. He has looked sharp. Like, if we think when he came back from restart or lockdown or whatever you want to say, he had just come back from injury as well, and it looks to have taken him a bit of time to get up to match sharpness, but he looks sharp now, and a lot of people who sold him for Greenwood are starting to hate that and now think it's a massive mistake, and I've even seen some people thinking of reversing the transfer. So I really think against West Ham, it's a great fixture. Now, it's David Moyes, West Ham. Could they shut up shop? Maybe. They could cause us problems. Worth saying that Southampton and Crystal Palace have caused Man United problems the last couple of games. But the two key things is they've eventually been able to get goals, 2 in each of the last 2 games. It's at Old Trafford again. I think this is a really good match. So Rashford, Martial and Fernandes, all great captains. I actually don't think there's much to split them. And if you think that Rashford's going to take the next penalty, which he could do, that might even make him a slightly better option than Fernandes. And he's also got the least amount of owners out of the 3 players I've mentioned. So all great options. I think Bruno's looked tired, but I'm hoping he gets a few minutes off against Chelsea in the FA Cup and is back fit and strong for that West Ham game. Bournemouth versus Southampton. This is all about Danny Ings. Very consistent, not necessarily explosive. I think there's better options. The ones I've talked about, basically, I think are better options personally, but no FA Cup game for Danny Ings to worry about. It's just going to get a bit of a rest until that Bournemouth game, which I think is on Sunday. So not a huge rest, to be fair, but still enough, and he's definitely going to play because Hasenhüttl's pretty much said that. So unless there's a knock or an injury we hear about, shouldn't be too many concerns there. So he's Mr. Consistent. I like him against Bournemouth. The only thing I would say is Bournemouth have looked a little bit better. So for me, there's better options, but I'm not discounting Danny Ings at all. And then Watford versus Man City. I think the reverse fixture this season was 8-0 to Man City. Not saying that's going to happen again. And I do worry a little bit if the likes of De Bruyne get another rest after the FA Cup game, depending on how much they have to play. Because Pep said time and time and again, he's made 5 or 6 changes every single game since restart pretty much. Now, a lot of them are defenders sometimes, but it could be De Bruyne missing out. So I think if you're brave enough to go for a Man City player that you think is definitely going to play, there could be some big points in this. And especially compared to Norwich on the last day of the season, this probably will be where they're less captain. So we'll probably see more Salah, more Mane, more Martial, Fernandes, Rashford captains, I think, than probably most Man City players. So it could be a good chance to go a little bit different. Because against Norwich, especially if we get team news, everyone's going to captain Man City players. So if you're brave, go for it. Try and beat the rotation. Even if they come off the bench, they could score points. It didn't happen last game week, but maybe it will this week. So plenty of captain options. I really like Martial and basically all the Man United players. But I do think Salah and Mane still have something left to say in the captaincy and Golden Boot race. That's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a like. Much appreciated. Also, subscribe if you're new around here. Hit that notification bell. Plenty of videos and live streams still coming for the rest of Game Week 37 and Game Week 38 next week, and of course next season too. So hit that subscription button and hit that notification bell. If you want to follow me, by the way, I'm doing kind of a little bit of extra video content, like short clips, 60 seconds, and live streams over on Instagram. So the links are in the description below. You can follow me on Twitter as well. Very active over there. And of course, if you want to support the channel, get involved with the Slack channel, and obviously into next season as well, supporting Let's Talk FPL. There is a Patreon link in the description below. Otherwise, good luck in Game Week 37 plus. I'll be back with a deadline stream at 3:30 PM Saturday to go through all the latest news, all the latest dilemmas running up to that deadline as well. And then, of course, I'll be back next week. Good luck in Game Week 37 plus. I'll see you soon.